Elena Koslov had been with the resistance for 3 years, and in those 3 years, she'd mastered the art of being underestimated. Not in the way that reconnaissance specialists melted into the background, but in the deliberate way that combat engineers were overlooked despite keeping entire battalions operational. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. She arrived at the hidden mountain base Night Haven at 0400 hours every morning, 90 minutes before her required check-in, and often remained until midnight, designing and fabricating weapons that stretched the boundaries of conventional warfare. Her workstation was nestled in the corner of the Tactical Operations Center, surrounded by communications equipment, mission planning tables, and the constant hum of a resistance base at war. At 28, Elena possessed the kind of methodical brilliance that military operations depended on, but rarely celebrated. She could calculate explosive yields with uncanny precision, design custom weaponry for impossible infiltration scenarios, and anticipate equipment failures before they occurred. When field teams needed specialized armaments in hostile territory, Elena could deliver custom solutions that seemed to bend the laws of physics. When standard-issue firearms failed in extreme environments, she already had prototype alternatives deploying before most officers realized there was a problem. But what nobody knew, what Elena carefully concealed beneath her professional demeanor, was that she spent every spare moment perfecting her revolutionary Crossbow design. A weapon capable of firing explosive-tipped bolts with devastating accuracy. Not the standard projectile weapons that every soldier carried during operations, but an advanced carbon-composite crossbow with multiple firing modes, specialized explosive bolts, and classified stealth capabilities that crossed her desk when coordinating with Special Forces teams. She'd committed to memory the ballistic parameters of every weapon system in their arsenal, from the standard-issue pulse rifles to the specialized railguns used by their marksmen during extended operations. This morning began like countless others before it. Elena was analyzing vulnerability reports from the eastern border region when Commander Victor Hargrove entered the operations center, his combat boots leaving dusty imprints on the recently cleaned floor. Behind him followed his usual entourage: Lieutenant Sophia Reed, a tactical officer who'd arrived 3 months ago straight from the academy, and Staff Sergeant James Wilson, the commander's favorite squad leader who seemingly could do no wrong. "Koslov?" Hargrove called out, not bothering to approach her station. "We need those new tactical options for tomorrow's infiltration by 1300 hours. Think you can handle that? Or should I reassign it to someone with actual field experience?" Elena looked up from her monitor, her expression professionally neutral, despite the familiar sting of his words. "The tactical options were completed at 600 hours, sir. They've been uploaded to the secure server with hard copies placed in your briefing folder. I've included 3 alternative approaches, accounting for recent enemy surveillance, and highlighted potential ambush points." Reed smirked visibly. "Always trying to prove something," she muttered loud enough for Elena to hear. "Actually," Elena continued, maintaining her composure, "I noticed a potential security gap in the planned infiltration route for tomorrow's mission. The electromagnetic interference in the mountain pass creates a 15-minute window where our teams will be completely isolated. If we adjust departure times or position a relay team at these coordinates, we can maintain continuous contact." Hargrove's jaw tightened noticeably. He didn't appreciate being corrected, especially not by a combat engineer who'd never led troops in a firefight. "I'll be the judge of what requires adjustment, Koslov. Just stick to your weapons development and leave tactical decisions to soldiers who've actually seen combat." Elena saved her work and stood up. Retrieving a folder from her filing cabinet, she placed it on her desk and opened it deliberately. "Sir, I've cross-referenced recent ambush patterns with topographical features along all proposed routes. The data suggests a high probability of—" "Enough, Koslov." Hargrove's voice cut through the operations center like a rifle shot. "You're a support specialist, not a combat officer. You build weapons and repair equipment. You don't make tactical assessments about combat operations. That's why you're stuck behind that desk instead of leading patrols with real soldiers." The operations center fell silent, except for the steady beep of communication equipment and the distant hum of generators. Wilson shifted his weight uncomfortably, and even Reed seemed to sense that something fundamental had shifted in the atmosphere. Elena closed the folder slowly, her fingers steady, despite the heat rising in her face. "Understood, sir," she said quietly. As Hargrove and his followers left, Elena remained standing at her desk, staring at the closed folder. Inside were copies of every combat certification she'd ever earned, every advanced tactical training module she'd completed in her free time, every marksmanship record she'd set on the range when nobody was watching. Also tucked away was a transfer request she'd received 2 weeks ago, a request with Special Reconnaissance Force letterhead that Hargrove knew nothing about. Elena had been invisible for 3 years, but invisibility came with unexpected advantages. People didn't notice when you stayed after hours to use the combat simulators. They didn't question why you volunteered for every advanced weapons qualification that came through the base. And they certainly didn't expect you to have connections that extended far beyond your immediate chain of command. She sat back down at her station and reopened the vulnerability reports. Then, almost as an afterthought, she opened a secure communication channel and began typing a message to Major Diana Winters at Special Reconnaissance Force headquarters. The subject line read, "Assessment complete. Ready for extraction." Elena had spent 3 years learning to be invisible within the system. Now it was time to disappear completely and reappear precisely when no one expected her to be. 2 days after the confrontation in the operations center, Elena arrived at work to find her security credentials had been downgraded. She stood at the entrance to the tactical planning section, watching as her access card triggered a red denial light on the scanner. A line of intelligence officers waited behind her, their morning briefings delayed as she repeatedly swiped the card that had worked flawlessly for 3 years. "Having problems, Koslov?" Lieutenant Reed appeared beside her, satisfaction evident in her tone. "Maybe you should try the general engineering area, where the support personnel belong." Elena stepped aside, allowing Reed to swipe her own credentials. The door unlocked immediately with an affirmative beep. "There must be a system error," Elena said evenly. "I'll check with security." "Oh, there's no error," Reed replied, holding the door open, but pointedly blocking Elena's path. "Commander Hargrove implemented new security protocols yesterday. Apparently, there were concerns about non-essential personnel accessing sensitive operational information." The officers waiting behind them exchanged uncomfortable glances. Master Sergeant Thomas Rivera, a 20-year veteran who had worked with Elena on countless mission support operations, stepped forward. "Ma'am, with respect, Specialist Koslov has clearance for this area. She coordinates all our weapons systems and has access to—" "New protocols, Rivera," Reed interrupted sharply. "Take it up with the commander if you have issues with proper security measures." Elena watched Reed disappear into the restricted area, then turned to Rivera. "It's fine, Sergeant. I'll sort this out." But as Elena walked across the base toward the administration building, she noticed other changes. The keypad codes to the equipment storage facilities had been changed. Her regular station in the operations center had been reassigned to a junior analyst. Her name had been removed from the mission briefing distribution list posted in the main corridor. In the administration office, Elena found herself sitting across from Major Daniel Foster, the base's personnel officer. Foster looked distinctly uncomfortable as he reviewed her file on his tablet. "I'm sorry, Specialist Koslov. The access restriction came directly from Commander Hargrove." He cited operational security concerns. "Major, I've maintained top-secret clearance for 3 years without incident. My record is spotless. What specific security concern?" "He didn't specify," Foster said quickly, avoiding her gaze. "But he did mention that your recent behavior has been concerning. Apparently, you've been overstepping your assigned duties and attempting to influence operational decisions." Elena felt something cold settle in her stomach. "What decisions?" Foster consulted his notes. "Questioning established patrol routes, attempting to override tactical assessments, challenging command decisions in front of subordinates."
He looked up at her with what might have been sympathy. "Look, Elena, I've known you since you arrived at Nighthaven. This doesn't sound like you, but Hargrove is building a case that you're becoming disruptive to unit cohesion." "Disruptive for doing my job?" "For doing more than your job," Foster corrected. "For acting like you're qualified to make decisions that are above your position and experience level." Elena left the administration building with her access temporarily restored to basic levels, but the message was unmistakable. Stay in your lane or lose your position entirely. As she walked back toward her reassigned workspace in the general engineering area, she passed the training grounds where Wilson was leading a squad through pre-mission drills. He nodded to her briefly, seemingly oblivious to the targeted campaign building against her. That evening, Elena stayed late again, but this time she wasn't alone. Master Sergeant Rivera found her in the nearly empty mess hall at 2100 hours, nursing a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. "Koslov, what's really happening here?" Rivera asked, settling into the seat across from her. "Hargrove has been asking questions about your work patterns, your access history, even your training records. I've never seen him target someone like this." "I think he wants me gone, Chief." "Why? You're the most effective weapons specialist this base has. Half our successful operations in the past year wouldn't have happened without your innovations." Elena studied Rivera carefully. He represented the old guard of the resistance, someone who valued competence over politics and results over appearances. "Can I ask you something off the record?" "Shoot." "If someone hypothetically had all the qualifications for field operations, all the training, all the certifications, but was blocked from field assignments because of politics or preconceptions, what would you advise them to do?" Rivera was quiet for a long moment, turning his coffee mug slowly between weathered hands. "Hypothetically, I'd say that person should remember that the resistance is bigger than any one base, and bigger than any one commanding officer. Sometimes you have to navigate around obstacles instead of confronting them directly, even if it means career suicide." Elena nodded. "Some things are worth the risk," Rivera's voice softened. "And some people are meant to be in the fight, whether or not their current assignment reflects that reality." After Rivera left, Elena opened her secured tablet and composed a message to Major Winters. "Situation accelerating. Request immediate transfer activation." The response arrived within 30 minutes. "Request confirmed. Report to Blackspire, 600 Monday for final assessment. New assignment begins immediately upon qualification." Elena printed the message, folded it carefully, and tucked it into her pocket. Tomorrow she would submit a formal transfer request to Special Reconnaissance Force. She would follow proper channels and document everything meticulously. But tonight she had one more message to send. This one went directly to Colonel Alexandra Vance, the regional commander and Hargrove's superior. The subject line read, "Request for formal review of systemic discrimination and safety concerns." Elena had been playing defense for 3 years. Now it was time to go on the offensive. She'd barely slept, but her eyes were clear and focused as she arranged her evidence on the conference table. Commander Hargrove entered at precisely 0700, followed by Lieutenant Reed and Major Foster. Elena's pulse quickened. This wasn't a standard personnel review. This was a coordinated effort to eliminate a perceived threat. "Specialist Koslov," Hargrove began without preamble, remaining standing to emphasize his authority. "It has come to my attention that you've been engaging in unauthorized communications with personnel outside this command structure. Specifically, you've been discussing operational details with individuals who lack proper clearance." Elena felt ice forming her veins. "Sir, I need to see the specific allegations." "Lieutenant Reed, please read the charges." Reed opened a folder with theatrical precision. On Monday, April 12th, Specialist Koslov was observed discussing tactical insertion methods with non-combat personnel in the base gymnasium. On Wednesday, April 14th, she accessed classified combat simulation software without proper authorization. On Friday, April 16th, she attempted to override established field protocols for the Eastern Corridor mission without consulting the chain of command. Elena maintained her composure despite the deliberate mischaracterization of events. Each charge was technically accurate, but stripped of all context. The non-combat personnel in the gym was a visiting Special Forces operator she'd been helping with custom equipment. The simulation software was available to all personnel with her clearance level for testing purposes. The protocol adjustment was an emergency measure she'd suggested when intelligence indicated high probability of ambush. "Sir," Elena said evenly, "I can provide context for each of these incidents that demonstrate they were within regulations and necessary for mission success." "Context doesn't change the facts, Koslov," Hargrove interrupted. "You've been operating outside your authority. You've been acting like you belong in field roles that you're not qualified to perform. It's time you accept reality." Elena looked at the three faces across from her. Foster appeared uncomfortable, avoiding eye contact. Reed looked triumphant. Hargrove had the expression of a man who believed victory was already secured. "What reality is that, sir?" "That you're a 28-year-old support specialist who will never see combat? That all your little fantasies about being a field operator, about being on the front lines are delusions? You're not combat material, Koslov. You're too weak physically and mentally to handle the real fight." The words hit Elena like physical blows. She'd heard variations of this assessment throughout her career, but hearing it stated so bluntly in an official setting made it more devastating. "Furthermore," Hargrove continued, "I am recommending immediate transfer to a rear logistics position where your unauthorized activities won't compromise operational security. Somewhere where your physical limitations won't endanger actual soldiers." Elena stared at the table, her vision momentarily blurring. 3 years of exemplary service, 3 years of exceeding every standard, 3 years of proving herself daily. And it came down to this moment in a sterile room with 3 people who had already determined her fate based on preconceptions rather than performance. "Do you have anything to say for yourself?" Hargrove asked, the question purely procedural. Elena looked up at him, and for the first time in 3 years, she allowed him to see exactly what she was thinking. "Yes, sir, I do." She reached into her portfolio and extracted a single sheet of paper with official letterhead. "This is my formal transfer request to Special Reconnaissance Force effective immediately. I submitted it to Colonel Vance yesterday afternoon." Hargrove's face drained of color. "You can't do that." "I can, sir, and I did." Elena stood, her chair scraping against the floor. "While you were building your case against me, I was building my case for me. Every combat qualification I completed, every advanced tactical certification I earned, every commendation from field operators who valued my contributions, all of it went into my SRF application." Reed leaned forward. "You can't just transfer to Special Forces. That's not how it works." Elena turned to her with a composed smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Actually, Lieutenant, that's precisely how it works, when you have the qualifications they need and the recommendations they respect. Interesting thing about being invisible for 3 years, you learn to develop relationships beyond your immediate chain of command." She placed another document on the table. "This is my acceptance letter from Major Diana Winters of SRF. I report to Blackspire on Monday for final qualification assessment." Hargrove snatched the letter, scanning it rapidly. "This can't be legitimate." "I assure you it is, sir. Special Reconnaissance Force is particularly interested in engineers who are also qualified in advanced combat operations, especially ones who've maintained their training while developing revolutionary weapon systems." Elena gathered her documentation and moved toward the door. "Oh, and Commander, you might want to verify your facts before making accusations about unauthorized activities. Everything I did was within regulations, and I have the documentation to prove it." As she reached the door, she turned back one final time.
You were right about one thing, sir. I was never meant to be just a support specialist. I was meant to fight. The door closed behind her with a soft click, leaving three very stunned people in a suddenly silent room. Elena's quarters had always been minimal, but now they resembled a tactical operations center. Combat manuals covered her desk. Her laptop displayed multiple windows of Special Reconnaissance Force training protocols, and her bed was buried under equipment checklists and qualification records. She had 72 hours to prepare for the most important evaluation of her career. The phone rang at 05:30 Friday morning. Elena answered immediately, expecting Major Winters with final instructions. Instead, she heard Rivera's voice. "Koslov, we need to talk now." 20 minutes later, Elena opened her door to find not just Rivera, but Staff Sergeant Wilson and Technical Specialist Amira Nazari from the communications section. They had the unmistakable look of people engaged in something unauthorized. "What's happening, Chief?" Elena asked, stepping aside to let them enter. Rivera surveyed her quarters, taking in the evidence of her preparations. "Damn, Elena, you really were ready all along." "Word circulating throughout the base," Wilson said, his usual cockiness replaced by something resembling respect. "About your transfer, about SRF, about what happened in that meeting with Hargrove." Nasari, who rarely spoke above a whisper, stepped forward. "Elena, I need to tell you something. Hargrove tried to get me to falsify communications logs showing you accessed classified channels without authorization. He wanted me to backdate them to support his claims." Elena felt her stomach tighten. "What did you tell him?" "I told him to get lost," Nazari said with unexpected firmness. "But Elena, he's not finished. He's calling in favors, trying to get people to corroborate his accusations. He's scared." "Scared of what?" Rivera sat heavily on the only chair in the room. "He's scared that you're going to expose him for the fraud he is. Think about it. If you succeed with SRF, if you actually become a field operative, it proves that every time he's dismissed female support personnel as too weak for combat roles, he was wrong. And if he was wrong about you, what else has he been wrong about?" Elena sank onto the edge of her bed, suddenly feeling the weight of the situation. "So what do I do?" "You pass that assessment," Wilson said firmly. "You become the operator you were meant to be, and you prove that judgment based on preconceptions rather than performance is a liability in the field." "But what if I'm not ready? What if all my training isn't enough?" Nazari pulled a flash drive from her pocket. "These are the real after-action reports from the Eastern Corridor for the past 2 years, the ones that show how many times Hargrove's tactical genius nearly got people killed and how many times your weapons innovations and tactical suggestions saved missions that were falling apart." Elena stared at the flash drive. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because if Hargrove tries to sabotage your SRF transfer, you'll need leverage. And because we've all seen what happens when good soldiers stay quiet about bad leadership." That afternoon, Elena drove to a small private range outside the base perimeter. She'd been coming here for 18 months, training with retired Special Forces operator Marcus Chen. Chen had seen combat on 4 continents during his 25-year career, and he'd become Elena's mentor in tactics that went far beyond what standard training covered. "So," Chen said as they walked toward the secluded training area, "Monday is the big day." "I'm terrified," Elena admitted. "Good. Fear keeps you honest. But Elena, I've trained hundreds of operators, and you have something rare. You have peripheral awareness. The way you process multiple threats simultaneously, the way you adapt to changing tactical environments, the way you think 3 moves ahead, that's not something you can teach. It's instinctive." They spent the next 3 hours running through advanced combat scenarios: close-quarters battle in restricted environments, multiple target acquisition under stress, tactical decision-making with incomplete intelligence. Elena handled each challenge with the calm precision that had made her exceptional at weapons engineering. "You know what your real advantage is?" Chen said as they cleaned their equipment afterward. "You've spent 3 years understanding how combat operations work from the support side. Most operators know how to fight, but they don't really understand the full spectrum of what makes missions succeed or fail. Most combat leaders think engineering is just about building better weapons," Elena replied.
They don't see how innovation, tactical integration, and operational flexibility create the foundation for everything they do. That evening, Elena sat at her small desk reviewing her SRF acceptance letter for the 20th time. The official language was clinical and precise, but buried in the fourth paragraph was a line that made her pulse quicken whenever she read it. Upon successful completion of assessment, candidate will be assigned to specialized rapid response team focusing on high-risk extraction operations in denied access environments. She picked up her phone and dialed a number she'd memorized but never called. Winters. Major, this is Specialist Koslov. Elena, are you prepared for Monday? Yes, ma'am, but I need to ask something. If I pass the assessment, what happens to my current assignment? There was a brief silence. Your current commanding officer will be notified of your transfer to SRF. Your new assignment will be classified, but I can tell you that you'll be working with some of the most elite operators in the resistance. Elena felt a smile forming. Including some I've helped support from the engineering side? Precisely. Elena, I want you to understand something. The position you're being considered for isn't just about combat skills. It's about being part of a team that operates beyond conventional boundaries, beyond traditional command structures. You'll be representing not just the resistance, but the entire special operations community. I understand, ma'am. Good. Get some rest. Monday starts early. Elena hung up and looked around her quarters one more time. In 72 hours, everything would change. She would either prove that 3 years of preparation had been worth it, or she would fail in the most public and definitive way possible. Either way, she'd finally know what she was truly capable of. Blackspire at 0500 hours was a different universe than the engineering center where Elena had spent the past 3 years. The training grounds buzzed with activity, as Special Forces teams conducted pre-dawn exercises and assessment groups prepared for the day's evaluations. Elena stood in the early morning darkness, her gear bag slung over her shoulder, watching operators move with practiced efficiency through their routines. This was the world she'd been preparing to join, not as support staff, but as an equal. Specialist Koslov. Elena turned to see a compact woman in tactical gear approaching. The name tape read, Captain Hayes. That's me, ma'am. I'm your assessment officer today. I understand you've been working toward this opportunity for quite some time. Elena nodded, her throat suddenly dry despite the 2 cups of coffee she'd consumed during the 3-hour drive to Blackspire. Before we begin, I want you to know that I've reviewed your file thoroughly. Your engineering record is impressive, and your training scores are exceptional, but simulations and training aren't reality. Today, we're going to find out if you have what it takes to handle the real thing.
They walked toward a complex of buildings that housed the assessment center. Elena had studied the SRF selection process meticulously, but seeing the actual facilities made everything suddenly more concrete. We'll start with physical assessment, then move to tactical decision-making, weapons proficiency, and finally scenario-based evaluation, Hayes explained. Most candidates find the last part most challenging. It combines physical stress, sleep deprivation, and complex problem-solving. The next 12 hours were the most grueling of Elena's life. The physical assessment pushed her to absolute limits. Endurance runs with full combat load, obstacle courses designed to test both strength and agility, and close-quarters combat against experienced operators. Elena's muscles burned and her lungs screamed for oxygen, but she refused to quit. During the tactical assessment, she drew on her years of studying combat operations from the support side. When presented with complex scenarios involving multiple variables, she demonstrated a holistic understanding that impressed even the veteran operators conducting the evaluation. Most candidates approach these problems from a purely tactical perspective, Captain Hayes noted as Elena completed a particularly challenging scenario. You're integrating engineering, intelligence, and tactical considerations simultaneously. That's rare. It's how real operations work, ma'am. Everything's connected. The weapons qualification came next. Elena demonstrated proficiency with every platform they placed before her. Rifles, pistols, shotguns, specialized weapons. Years of private training with Chen had given her muscle memory and precision that surprised the assessment team. "Where did you learn to shoot like that, Koslov?" asked Master Sergeant Diaz, the head of the weapons assessment. "On my own time, sir. 3 years of it." As dusk fell, the final phase began, the scenario-based evaluation. Elena, already exhausted from the day's assessment, was inserted into a simulated hostile environment with minimal equipment and a complex extraction mission. For the next 8 hours, she navigated the challenge, making critical decisions under pressure, adapting to changing conditions, and demonstrating the core qualities required for special operations. When she finally completed the scenario at 0200 hours, Captain Hayes was waiting. "That's it, Koslov. Assessment complete." "How did I do, ma'am?" Hayes studied her for a long moment. "Official results come tomorrow, but I'll tell you this. In 5 years of running assessments, I've rarely seen someone with your combination of tactical awareness and strategic thinking. Get some rest. You've earned it." Elena slept for 4 hours in a Spartan barracks room, her dreams filled with fragments of the day's challenges. At 0700 hours, she reported to the administration building as instructed, her uniform fresh, but her body still aching from the previous day's ordeal. Major Winters was waiting in a small conference room, a folder open before her. "Specialist Koslov, please sit down." Elena sat, her back straight despite her exhaustion, her face neutral despite the anxiety churning in her stomach. "I've reviewed your assessment results," Winters began, her expression unreadable. Captain Hayes was quite thorough in her evaluation. Elena waited, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "You've set several records in the tactical decision-making module. Your weapons proficiency is in the top percentile. Your physical performance, while not record-setting, demonstrated the required endurance and resilience. And your performance in the scenario-based evaluation showed exactly the kind of adaptability we need." Winters closed the folder and looked directly at Elena. "Welcome to Special Reconnaissance Force, Sergeant Koslov." Elena blinked. "Sergeant?" "The promotion comes with the assignment." "Congratulations, Elena. You've earned it." As they discussed the details of her new assignment, Elena felt tears threatening. 3 years of preparation, 3 years of being told she wasn't qualified, 3 years of being dismissed as too weak for combat roles. And now she was exactly where she belonged, among the elite operators she'd supported from the shadows. "When do I start, ma'am?" "Immediately. Your new team is already waiting to meet you. And, Elena, they specifically requested you based on your weapons innovations for their operations." They know exactly what you're capable of. The phone in Commander Hargrove's office started ringing at 0830 hours and didn't stop. Elena's transfer to SRF had been confirmed through official channels, and word was spreading through Nighthaven like wildfire. The support specialist who'd been dismissed as too weak for combat had just qualified for one of the most elite combat units in the Resistance. "Sir, you need to see this." Lieutenant Reed burst into Hargrove's office, her usual confidence noticeably diminished. She held up her tablet, displaying an official notification from Central Command. "Effective immediately, Specialist Elena Koslov is transferred to Special Reconnaissance Force under Operational Directive 33527. All material pertaining to Specialist Koslov's qualifications and performance evaluations are to be forwarded to Major Diana Winters, SRF Personnel Division." Hargrove read the notification 3 times, his jaw tightening with each reading. "This proves nothing," he said finally. "Anyone can transfer to a support role in SRF. That doesn't make her a combat operator." "Sir," Reed swallowed hard, "the transfer code 33527 designates specialized combat operations personnel. It's not a support role. And there's more. She's been promoted to sergeant." The implications hit Hargrove like a physical blow. If Elena had been accepted as a combat operator and promoted in the process, it meant her qualifications had been validated at the highest levels. It meant everything he'd said about her being too weak for combat had been definitively refuted by the most elite fighting force in the Resistance. "Get me Colonel Vance on the phone," Hargrove said quietly. His conversation with his superior was brief and uncomfortable.
Colonel Vance had already been contacted by SRF, confirming Elena's transfer and commending her exceptional performance during assessment. She'd also received several messages from other personnel at Nighthaven, inquiring about the circumstances surrounding Elena's departure. "Victor," Colonel Vance said, using Hargrove's first name in a tone that indicated this was not a friendly conversation. "I need to understand what happened with Specialist Koslov. SRF marked her transfer as urgent and mentioned she'd been operating under adverse conditions at her previous assignment." Hargrove felt sweat forming on his forehead. "Ma'am, I was simply maintaining unit discipline and ensuring proper role assignment based on demonstrated capabilities. I've been reviewing the documentation you submitted regarding Kozlov's performance issues. Interesting reading. You claim she was insubordinate and exceeded her authority, but I've also been examining her actual performance records. 3 years of superior ratings, multiple commendations, and not a single disciplinary action until this sudden flurry of complaints from you." "Ma'am, her recent behavior, Vance interrupted, "appears to have been preparation for an SRF assignment that she obtained through her own qualifications and initiative, an assignment that reflects exceptionally well on this command and on the resistance as a whole. Unless there's something you're not telling me." Hargrove realized he was trapped. Any attempt to further discredit Elena would now appear like deliberate obstruction of a valuable military asset. "No, ma'am. I may have misinterpreted the scope of her activities." "I see. Well, I think we need to have a longer conversation about your personnel management approach. My office, 1 hour." After hanging up, Hargrove sat at his desk, staring at the wall. Within the span of a few hours, his carefully constructed narrative about Elena's inadequacies had disintegrated. Worse, he was beginning to realize that several people on the base had been documenting his treatment of her, and those records would not present him in a favorable light. Meanwhile, at Blackspire, Elena was completing her final briefing as a newly minted SRF operator. Major Winters handed her a folder containing her new assignment details. "You'll be stationed with Strike Team Phantom at our forward operating base in Razul Province. Your team specializes in high-risk extraction operations in denied access territory. You'll be conducting everything from intelligence gathering to direct action missions, working with operators from across the special operations community." Elena reviewed the assignment details, hardly believing what she was reading. "Ma'am, this is exactly what I've been training for."
I know. Your background in combat engineering gives you a unique perspective on special operations. You understand the entire operational spectrum, from innovation to execution. That's precisely what we need for these complex missions. What about my previous assignment, Commander Hargrove? Winter's expression hardened slightly. Your former commander is currently having a conversation with his superior about his personnel management practices. I suspect he's learning that talented operators don't materialize out of nowhere. They're developed through proper leadership and support. When you try to suppress talent instead of nurturing it, you end up losing valuable assets to organizations that know how to recognize potential. Elena felt a mixture of satisfaction and regret. She'd achieved her goal, but at the cost of burning bridges with her former unit. I hope I didn't cause too much trouble. Elena, you didn't cause trouble, you revealed trouble that already existed. There's a difference. That afternoon, Elena received a call from Rivera. Elena, I just wanted to tell you that the entire support staff watched Commander Hargrove get called into Colonel Vance's office today. The meeting lasted 3 hours. He came out looking like he'd been through a firefight and lost badly. How's everyone taking the news? Mixed reactions. The people who actually worked with you are proud as hell. The people who dismissed you are suddenly reviewing their assessment criteria. Let's just say that Hargrove is having a very bad day. Word is that Colonel Vance is conducting a full review of his command decisions. Elena felt a pang of guilt. I never wanted to hurt anyone's career. Elena, you didn't hurt anyone's career. You saved your own. And you showed a lot of people on this base that excellence doesn't always look like what they expect. You've got support specialists now asking about combat training, communications techs inquiring about operator qualifications. You've inspired people. I just wanted to fight. I know, But sometimes when you reach for what you want, you show other people what's possible for them too. That's not a bad thing. After ending the call, Elena walked to the window of her temporary quarters at Blackspire. Tomorrow she would fly to her new assignment. She'd be working with some of the most elite operators in the Resistance, conducting missions that would test every skill she'd developed over the past 3 years. But tonight, she was thinking about the invisible people at bases around the world. The engineers, logistics officers, and communications technicians who kept everything running while others took the glory. She hoped her story would reach some of them, and that they'd understand that being underestimated could be leveraged if you used it correctly. Elena had spent 3 years learning to be invisible within the system. Now she was ready to show the world exactly what invisible people could accomplish when they finally stepped into the light. 2 weeks after Elena's transfer to SRF, the investigation into Commander Hargrove's leadership practices was complete. The briefing room at Nighthaven was filled with personnel from across the base. Everyone from senior officers to junior enlisted, all summoned to hear the findings of Colonel Vance's review. Elena wasn't there, of course. She was 7,000 miles away, at the SRF Forward Operating Base, preparing for her first official mission as a combat operator. But her presence was felt in every document, every witness statement, every piece of evidence that had been gathered about her treatment. The review has revealed several concerning patterns, Colonel Vance announced to the assembled group. First, we found evidence of discriminatory practices in assignment and advancement opportunities. Second, there were multiple instances of retaliation against personnel who questioned established procedures. Third, and most troubling, we found evidence of deliberate suppression of personnel advancement based on gender bias rather than performance metrics. Master Sergeant Rivera sat in the front row, watching Commander Hargrove's face grow increasingly pale with each revelation. Next to him, technical specialist Nazari held a tablet containing the records that had helped build the case against Hargrove's leadership.
The most egregious example, Vance continued, involves former specialist Elena Koslov, now Sergeant Koslov of Special Reconnaissance Force. Despite 3 years of exemplary service, advanced qualifications obtained through her own initiative, and performance metrics that exceeded many of our combat personnel, she was systematically excluded from advancement opportunities and subjected to increasing restrictions on her duties. Lieutenant Reed shifted uncomfortably in her seat. 2 weeks ago, she had been part of Hargrove's inner circle. Now she was realizing how her participation in Elena's humiliation appeared to the rest of the command. Furthermore, Vance said, her voice growing colder, when Sergeant Koslov attempted to pursue legitimate career advancement through proper channels, she was subjected to fabricated accusations, inappropriate security clearance restrictions, and what can only be described as a coordinated campaign designed to force her resignation. The room was completely silent, except for the hum of the air conditioning system. Everyone present had witnessed pieces of Elena's treatment, but hearing it presented systematically was damning. The irony, Vance continued, is that while Commander Hargrove was building a case to remove Koslov from the Resistance entirely, she was being recruited by Special Reconnaissance Force as one of the most promising operator candidates they'd seen in years. Her performance during assessment was described as exceptional, and her background in engineering and weapon systems was considered invaluable for complex special operations missions. Staff Sergeant Wilson raised his hand. "Ma'am, what's Sergeant Kozlov's current status?" Vance consulted her notes. "She's completed her initial integration phase and has been assigned to Strike Team Phantom, responsible for high-risk extraction operations in denied access environments. 3 days ago, she successfully completed her first mission, a reconnaissance operation that required infiltrating hostile territory under extreme conditions. Her team leader described her performance as flawless." A murmur ran through the room. The support specialist they'd known was now conducting classified combat missions with elite special operations teams. "The question before us," Vance said, "is how we ensure this kind of leadership failure doesn't happen again.
We lost a valuable operator, not because she wasn't qualified, but because her immediate supervisor couldn't see past his own preconceptions. She turned her attention directly to Hargrove. Commander, you have two options. You can request immediate reassignment to a non-leadership position at another installation, or you can face formal disciplinary proceedings that will likely result in your separation from the resistance. I'll give you 24 hours to decide. After the meeting, Rivera found himself in the parking lot with several other NCOs who had worked closely with Elena. The mood was somber, but satisfied. "I keep thinking about her last day here," Wilson said. "When she walked out of that meeting with her head held high, she knew something we didn't. She knew she was better than how she was being treated, and she did something about it." "Instead of just accepting it as the way things are," Nazari replied. Specialist Anna Martinez, who rarely spoke in group settings, surprised everyone with her next comment. "My sister's thinking about joining the resistance. Last night, I told her about Elena. I told her that's what happens when you work hard and don't let anyone tell you what you can't do because of who you are." Meanwhile, in the administration building, Hargrove sat alone in his office, staring at his computer screen. He'd already begun typing his transfer request, knowing that fighting the charges would only make things worse. The evidence against him was overwhelming, and several of his former allies had provided statements supporting the investigation's findings. His phone buzzed with a message from Lieutenant Reed. "Sir, I wanted to apologize for my role in what happened to Elena. I was wrong, and I'm sorry." Similar messages had been arriving all day. People who had participated in Elena's marginalization were now distancing themselves, realizing how badly they'd misjudged the situation.
The base that had once seemed unified under his leadership was now questioning everything he'd told them about combat readiness, qualifications, and who deserved respect. That evening, Rivera received a video call from Elena herself. The connection was poor, the image grainy, but Elena's face was unmistakable even in the dim light of what appeared to be a tactical operations center. "Chief," Rivera said, "I heard about the investigation results. How's everyone handling it?" "Mixed feelings," Elena admitted. "People are happy you got what you deserved, but there's some guilt about not speaking up sooner." "No one should feel guilty," Rivera said firmly. "Military hierarchy exists for a reason. People were following the chain of command. I don't blame anyone for that." "What about Hargrove?" Elena was quiet for a moment. "I feel sorry for him, actually. He was so focused on maintaining traditional combat roles that he couldn't recognize talent when it was right in front of him. That's not just bad leadership, it's a tactical liability that puts missions at risk." "Any regrets about how things went down?" "Only one," Elena replied. "I wish I'd found the courage to fight back sooner. Maybe if I had, other qualified people wouldn't have been subjected to the same treatment." "Elena, you fought back at exactly the right time in exactly the right way, and you inspired a lot of people here to think differently about what's possible." After ending the call, Rivera walked out to the training area where he often found himself when he needed to think. A group of young soldiers were running combat drills, including several female support specialists who'd been inspired by Elena's story. "Chief, is it true that Sergeant Koslov qualified for Strike Team Phantom on her first attempt?" asked a logistics specialist who'd recently started combat training. Rivera smiled. "She did. And you know why? Because Elena Koslov understood something that too many people forget. True combat readiness isn't just about physical strength. It's about tactical awareness, adaptability, and understanding the entire operational spectrum. She mastered those elements while everyone was focusing on what they thought she couldn't do." 3 months later, Elena crouched in the shadow of a bombed-out building, her team spread out in defensive positions around her. The extraction mission had gone sideways when unexpected enemy reinforcements cut off their primary exfiltration route. As the team's specialist in tactical systems and route planning, Elena was rapidly formulating alternative options. "Phantom Actual, this is Phantom 6, she whispered into her comm unit. "Primary route compromised. Hostile forces have established blocking positions at all pre-planned alternates, requesting satellite reconnaissance of Sector 74 for possible new exfil."
Negative, Phantom 6. Satellite assets unavailable for next 40 minutes. You're on your own. Elena processed this information while scanning the urban terrain around them. The team had a high-value intelligence asset to extract. The window was closing, and conventional options were exhausted. This was where her unique background proved invaluable. Phantom team, rally on my position. I have a new route. Captain Marcus Ramirez, the team leader, moved to her position. What are you thinking, Koslov? Elena pulled up a digital map on her tactical tablet. Sir, there's a maintenance tunnel system that doesn't appear on standard maps. I coordinated logistics for a joint operation in this region 2 years ago from Nighthaven. These tunnels were used to move supplies during the reconstruction effort. How do you know they're still accessible? I don't, but based on regional infrastructure patterns, they should connect to the drainage system here. She indicated a point 300 meters east, which would bypass all enemy checkpoints and give us access to the secondary landing zone. Ramirez studied her for a moment. That's why they wanted you on this team. Let's move. The team moved silently through the darkened streets, Elena leading them to a nondescript utility access point. The tunnel beyond was narrow and partially flooded, but it was unguarded and provided a direct route that circumvented the enemy's carefully planned containment strategy.
40 minutes later, they emerged at the extraction point, their high-value assets secure, the mission accomplished through a solution that had been invisible to standard tactical planning. As the extraction helicopter descended, Ramirez clasped Elena's shoulder. Koslov, when we get back to base, I'm putting you in for a commendation. That wasn't just quick thinking. That was the kind of operational awareness that saves lives. Elena nodded, feeling a sense of validation that went beyond any formal recognition. She had been exactly where she needed to be, doing exactly what she was meant to do. Not because she was trying to prove anything anymore, but because this was where her skills and preparation had led her. The mission that would define Elena's career began, like many others, with minimal warning and incomplete intelligence. Strike Team Phantom had been deployed to a remote forward operating position near the border of a contested region. Intelligence indicated that a high-value target was operating in the area, coordinating attacks on resistance forces. Elena was reviewing satellite imagery in the Tactical Operations Center when Captain Ramirez entered with the mission brief. Listen up, team. We have a time-sensitive target in Sector 12. Intelligence believes Commander Zakir is meeting with local cell leaders at a compound 20 kilometers north of our position. Our window is narrow. We need to move in the next 3 hours. Elena studied the intelligence packet, immediately noticing discrepancies in the pattern analysis. Sir, these movement patterns don't match Zakir's historical behavior. He's never met associates this close to resistance positions before. Ramirez nodded. I had the same concern. That's why you're taking point on the mission planning. If this is legitimate, we need the most direct approach possible. If it's a trap, we need to identify the real objective and adjust accordingly. 6 hours later, Elena was positioned on a ridge overlooking the target compound, observing through a high-powered scope while the rest of the team maintained a defensive perimeter. What she saw confirmed her suspicions. The patterns of movement didn't match the intelligence briefing. Instead of a high-level meeting, the compound appeared to be a staging area for something else entirely. Phantom Actual, this is Phantom 6. Target location shows minimal security presence, not consistent with HVT protocols. I'm seeing significant supply movement toward the eastern buildings. Request permission to maintain observation rather than immediate action. Granted, Phantom 6. What's your assessment? This isn't a leadership meeting, it's a logistics hub. They're moving weapons and equipment, not protecting personnel. I recommend we track the supply chain rather than hitting the compound. It could lead us to the actual operational base. Your call, Koslov. You've got tactical lead on this one. Elena directed the team to establish multiple observation points around the compound. Over the next 12 hours, they documented every vehicle, every personnel movement, building a comprehensive picture of the operation. When a heavily laden truck departed under cover of darkness, they were ready. Following at a safe distance, the team tracked the vehicle to a larger compound concealed in a remote valley, a location that hadn't appeared in any intelligence briefings. Elena's methodical approach had uncovered what appeared to be the actual regional operations center for the enemy network.
The team found themselves cut off from their planned extraction route, with reinforcements closing in from multiple directions. "Phantom Team, fall back to position Delta," Ramirez ordered, as incoming fire intensified. "Extraction point compromised, requesting immediate alternative." Elena assessed their situation rapidly. They had acquired the intelligence they needed and had neutralized key targets, but their position was becoming untenable. The team began a fighting withdrawal toward their secondary extraction point, moving through difficult terrain while maintaining tactical cohesion. Then disaster struck as they crossed an exposed ridgeline. A hidden sniper found his mark. Captain Ramirez went down hard, a bullet having shattered his leg and severed a major artery. "Man down!" Elena called, immediately moving to his position while the rest of the team provided covering fire. Blood was pumping from Ramirez's wound at an alarming rate. Elena applied a tourniquet with practiced efficiency, but it was clear he couldn't move under his own power. "Phantom Actual, Phantom 6. Captain is hit. Critical condition. We need immediate extraction." "Phantom 6. Nearest medevac is 20 minutes out. Hostile forces converging on your position from multiple vectors." Elena made a rapid assessment. The team was down to 7 effective operators, including herself. Hostile forces numbered at least 30 and were closing from 3 directions. Their only advantage was the defensible position they currently held, a rocky outcropping that provided cover from most angles. "Phantom Team, defensive positions," she ordered, her voice calm despite the gravity of their situation. "We hold here until extraction arrives." Master Sergeant Jackson, the team's senior NCO, looked at her skeptically. "Koslov, those are terrible odds." "Those are the only odds we've got. Set up interlocking fields of fire. Prioritize ammunition conservation. We only need to hold for 20 minutes. As the team established their defensive perimeter, Elena worked to stabilize Ramirez. His pulse was weak but steady, the tourniquet having slowed the bleeding enough to buy precious time. "Koslov," he whispered, his voice strained with pain. "You have tactical command. Get the team out." "We're all getting out, sir," she replied firmly. 20 minutes. We can hold for 20 minutes. The first wave of attackers came 5 minutes later, a probing action designed to test their defenses. The team responded with disciplined, targeted fire, repelling the assault with minimal ammunition expenditure. But Elena knew this was just the beginning. The enemy was assessing their position, looking for weaknesses, preparing for a more coordinated attack. She moved from position to position, adjusting fields of fire, redistributing ammunition, maintaining the defensive integrity of their perimeter. When the second attack came, it was from multiple directions simultaneously, a serious attempt to overwhelm their position through superior numbers. "Conserve ammunition," Elena reminded the team, as the firefight intensified. "Make every shot count." For 10 minutes, they held against increasingly determined assaults. The team was functioning with remarkable efficiency, their training and Elena's tactical guidance allowing them to repel forces that outnumbered them 4-1. But the situation was deteriorating. 2 more team members had sustained injuries, ammunition was running critically low, and the enemy was preparing for what appeared to be a final all-out assault. "Phantom 6, this is Archangel. Medevac 5 minutes out. Can you mark your position?" "Affirmative, Archangel. Be advised we are under heavy fire with multiple casualties. LZ is not secure." Elena assessed their options. The helicopter couldn't land under current conditions, but if they didn't create a secure landing zone, they'd lose Ramirez and possibly others. She made her decision. "Jackson, you and the team hold this position and prepare the wounded for immediate evacuation. I'm going to create a diversion." Jackson stared at her in disbelief. "Koslov, that's suicide." "It's tactical necessity. I need 5 minutes to draw their focus away from the LZ. That's the difference between all of us getting out or none of us getting out." She checked her weapon and grabbed additional magazines from their dwindling supply. "On my signal, pop smoke for the extraction." "Don't wait for me. Get the wounded on that helicopter."
Before anyone could object further, Elena slipped away from their position, moving laterally along the ridge to a position 50 meters east. From there, she had a clear view of the enemy's main concentration, approximately 20 fighters preparing for their final push. Elena took a deep breath, centered herself, and opened fire. Her first shots took down the apparent leader and two of his lieutenants, creating immediate confusion in their ranks. As expected, the majority of enemy fire redirected toward her position, away from the team's defensive perimeter. "Now, Jackson," she called into her radio, "mark the LZ." Clouds of purple smoke billowed from the team's position as Elena continued to engage the enemy force. She moved quickly between firing positions, creating the impression of multiple defenders. Her years of tactical training allowed her to maximize the defensive advantages of the terrain, using rocky outcroppings for cover while maintaining clear fields of fire. Through her scope, she saw the medevac helicopter approaching, its distinctive silhouette growing larger against the sky. The enemy forces saw it too, some redirecting their fire toward the incoming aircraft. Elena increased her rate of fire, drawing their attention back to her position, making herself the more immediate threat. The helicopter touched down in a swirl of dust and smoke. Elena provided covering fire as her team moved the wounded aboard, enemy rounds impacting the rocks around her position with increasing frequency. As the last team member boarded, she began her own movement toward extraction, bounding from cover to cover while maintaining suppressive fire. She was 20 meters from the helicopter when something unexpected happened. A round caught her rifle, shattering the receiver and rendering the weapon useless. Enemy fighters, seeing her suddenly disarmed, roared in triumph and surged forward, believing they had her cornered. Elena didn't hesitate. In one fluid motion, she dropped the ruined rifle and reached behind her back, unslinging the custom weapon she'd carried since joining SRF, the carbon-composite crossbow she had secretly designed and built during her years at Nighthaven. The enemy fighters faltered, momentarily confused by the strange-looking weapon. It wasn't the standard-issue firearms they were accustomed to seeing resistance fighters carry. This hesitation gave Elena the precious seconds she needed. She raised the crossbow, sighted on the lead fighter, and pulled the trigger. The bolt flew true, striking its target and detonating with a concussive blast that tore through the enemy's front line. Not waiting to assess the damage, Elena began rapid-firing explosive bolts into the enemy formation, each projectile finding its mark with devastating effect. The crossbow, silent except for the metallic click of its mechanism and the whistle of bolts through air, created a psychological terror among the enemy that conventional firearms never could. The explosive bolts seemed to materialize out of nowhere, bringing destruction without the telltale muzzle flash and report of standard weapons. "Koslov, we need to go now," Jackson shouted from the helicopter door, firing to provide her cover. Elena pushed herself to her feet, continuing to launch explosive bolts as she moved backward toward the aircraft. The enemy force, now in disarray from her unexpected counterattack, had retreated to cover, their coordinated assault transformed into a chaotic scramble for survival. As she reached the helicopter's edge, a round caught her in the side, the impact spinning her against the doorframe. Pain exploded through her torso, but training took over. She applied immediate pressure to the wound with one hand while firing a final bolt with the other. Jackson reached down and pulled her aboard as the helicopter banked away from the hot zone. Elena collapsed against the cabin wall, the adrenaline that had carried her finally ebbing. Medical personnel immediately moved to assess her wound. "Status report," she demanded through gritted teeth. "Captain, stable. Martinez and Chen are wounded but not critical. The rest of the team is operational. The intelligence package is secure," Jackson reported. "You held the line, Koslov. You held the damn line." Elena nodded, allowing the medic to administer pain medication as the helicopter gained altitude. Through the open door, she could see the enemy position growing smaller below, smoke rising from the impact points of her explosive bolts.
A position that had nearly been their grave had instead become the site of one of Strike Team Phantom's most successful operations. Back at the forward operating base, Elena awoke in the medical facility to find Colonel James Barrett, the SRF commander, standing at her bedside. "Sergeant Koslov," he said, his normally stern expression softened slightly. "How are you feeling?" "Ready to return to duty, sir," she replied automatically, though the pain in her side suggested otherwise. Barrett almost smiled. "Captain Ramirez has submitted his after-action report. It makes for interesting reading." Elena waited, unsure where this was heading. "He credits you with not only saving the team, but salvaging a critical intelligence operation. Says your tactical assessment identified the actual high-value target location after conventional intelligence had missed it. Says your battlefield command under fire was, quote, textbook perfect.
And he made special mention of your, what did he call it? Revolutionary crossbow platform. I was just doing my job, sir. Your job, Barrett repeated thoughtfully. You know, when your transfer came through, there were some who questioned placing a former support specialist in a direct action role, some who suggested you might not be strong enough for combat operations. Elena met his gaze steadily. And now, sir? Now I'm recommending you for the Silver Star and promoting you to Technical Sergeant, effective immediately. The team you saved is requesting you as their permanent tactical operations specialist, and our weapons division is very interested in your crossbow design. He placed a document on the bed beside her. This recommendation will go through without opposition. After 3 weeks of recovery, Elena returned to active duty. The strike team Phantom welcomed her back with a mixture of respect and camaraderie that she'd never experienced in her previous assignments. These were operators who judged her solely on her performance, not on preconceptions. Captain Ramirez, still using crutches as his leg healed, called her into the Tactical Operations Center on her first day back. Koslov, I wanted you to see this before the official announcement. He handed her a tablet displaying an internal military commendation bulletin. The headline read, Technical Sergeant Elena Koslov awarded Silver Star for extraordinary heroism in combat. Elena scanned the document, uncomfortable with the attention, but proud of the recognition. The citation detailed her actions during the mission, emphasizing her tactical decision-making, combat leadership, and personal courage under fire. There's more, Ramirez said, taking back the tablet and opening another document. Your actions have sparked some changes at the institutional level. Command is reviewing combat role qualification standards across the board. They're shifting from gender-based assessments to performance-based metrics. Elena looked up sharply. Because of one mission? Because your performance demolished their assumptions. You were the test case that proved the existing model was flawed. Ramirez set the tablet down. But that's not why I called you in. We have a new operation, and I want you to take lead on planning. Over the next 6 months, Elena led Strike Team Phantom through a series of increasingly complex missions. Her unique background in engineering and weapons development, combined with her proven combat capabilities, made her an invaluable asset for missions that required both tactical precision and strategic awareness. On a rare video call home, Elena was surprised to receive a message request from Lieutenant Reed, her former antagonist from Nighthaven. Koslov? Reed began awkwardly. I wanted to congratulate you on the Silver Star. It's well-deserved. Thank you, Elena replied neutrally, still uncertain of Reed's intentions. I also wanted to apologize. I was wrong about you. Wrong in how I treated you, wrong in what I assumed about your capabilities. Reed paused, visibly uncomfortable. After you left, things changed here. Colonel Vance implemented new policies for personnel assessment and advancement. I've been reevaluating a lot of my own assumptions. Elena studied her former adversary. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something that looked remarkably like genuine self-reflection. We all have assumptions challenged eventually. The question is what we do afterwards. I'm applying for advanced tactical training, following your footsteps in a way. Your success opened doors for others. After the call ended, Elena sat quietly, processing the unexpected conversation. Her personal journey had been about proving herself, about earning the role she knew she deserved. She hadn't set out to change the system or challenge institutional biases. Yet, somehow, she'd accomplished both. 6 months after receiving the Silver Star, Elena found herself back at Blackspire, this time as an instructor for a specialized joint operations course. Looking out at the classroom filled with operators from across the special operations community, she recognized the mixture of curiosity and skepticism in some of their expressions. My name is Technical Sergeant Elena Koslov, she began. Some of you have heard about me. Some of you have opinions about how I got here. I'm not concerned with either. What I am concerned with is preparing you for the operational realities of modern combat environments, where traditional models often fail. She activated the tactical display, showing a complex urban environment. This is where I learned that strength isn't just about physical capability, it's about adaptability, tactical awareness, and understanding the full spectrum of operational factors.
Those are the qualities that determine success or failure in the field. As the course progressed, Elena's reputation grew. Operators who had initially questioned her credentials became her strongest advocates. Her methodology, combining engineering expertise with combat experience, offered insights that traditional combat training often overlooked. After one particularly challenging simulation exercise, Master Sergeant Wilson, a Delta Force operator with 15 years of experience, approached her. "You know, Koslov, when I heard a former weapons engineer was teaching advanced tactics, I had my doubts. I was wrong." "Most people were," Elena replied with a slight smile. "It worked to my advantage." "How so?" "Being underestimated meant I had to be better, more prepared, more knowledgeable, more adaptable. I couldn't just meet the standard. I had to exceed it consistently enough that no one could question my place." Wilson nodded thoughtfully. "Well, after watching you work, I'd say you didn't just earn your place. You redefined what that place could be." That evening, Elena received an unexpected visitor in her office, Colonel Alexandra Vance, her former regional commander from Nighthaven. "Technical Sergeant Koslov," Vance said with genuine warmth. "It's good to see you again." "You too, ma'am. What brings you to Blackspire?" "Your course, actually. It's generating significant attention at the command level. Your integrated approach to tactical operations is being considered for wider implementation." Elena gestured for the colonel to take a seat. "That's unexpected." "Is it? You've proven that combining engineering expertise with tactical operations creates more effective combat teams. The results speak for themselves." Vance studied her for a moment. "I also wanted to update you on some developments at Nighthaven. Commander Hargrove was reassigned to a training facility in the Northern Territory. His leadership role has been significantly reduced." Vance placed a folder on Elena's desk. "But that's not what I wanted to discuss. I'm here to offer you a new position." Elena opened the folder and scanned its contents, her eyebrows rising with each page. "Task Force Director? That's typically reserved for officers with conventional career paths." "Yes, it has been. That's precisely what we're changing." Vance leaned forward. "The position would place you in charge of a new cross-functional team, incorporating both combat operators and support specialists. Your mission would be to develop and implement integrated tactical operations in high-complexity environments. You're creating a whole new operational model, one based on your experience and success. The Resistance is finally recognizing that the traditional separation between combat roles and support functions creates unnecessary vulnerabilities. We need integration, not division." Elena closed the folder, her mind racing with possibilities. "When would this start?" "Immediately, if you accept. You'd have considerable latitude in selecting your team members and establishing operational protocols." That night, Elena found herself unable to sleep. The weight of the decision before her was both exhilarating and daunting. She'd fought so hard to prove herself as a combat operator, to demonstrate that she belonged on the front lines.
Now she was being asked to bridge the worlds of combat and support in ways that had never been attempted. Her phone chimed with a message, an update from Strike Team Phantom. They'd completed another successful operation using the tactical integration methods she'd helped develop. Attached was a photo of the team, operators and support specialists together with a simple message: "Your model works. When are you coming back to lead us again?" The answer crystallized in that moment. She would accept Vance's offer, not to prove anything to anyone else, but because it was where she could make the most significant impact. The barriers she'd faced, the obstacles she'd overcome, they had prepared her to create pathways for others. 2 months later, Elena stood before her newly assembled Task Force Echo, 24 specialists from across the Resistance's combat and support divisions. Some were veterans with decades of experience, others were promising talents who had faced their own battles against institutional bias. "Our mission is unlike any you've trained for previously," Elena began. "We're not just integrating combat and support functions, we're redefining how military operations adapt to complex environments.
Each of you was selected because you've demonstrated excellence that transcends traditional role boundaries. She activated the briefing screen, displaying their first operational target, a region notorious for its challenging terrain and complex threat matrix. Conventional approaches have failed here repeatedly. Our approach will be different. We'll leverage the full spectrum of your capabilities, creating operational synergies that our adversaries won't anticipate or understand. Specialist Rebecca Chen, a communications specialist with unexpected combat proficiency, raised her hand. "Ma'am, how do we measure success in this new model?" "By mission accomplishment with minimal casualties and maximum efficiency. By creating solutions that neither pure combat teams nor pure support teams could develop independently. And ultimately, by proving that diversity of experience and expertise creates stronger operational capabilities." The team deployed 2 weeks later. Their first mission, extracting a deep cover intelligence asset from a region considered too volatile for conventional extraction methods, became a case study in the effectiveness of Elena's integrated approach. While traditional planners had focused on either overwhelming force or covert infiltration, Elena's team developed a hybrid solution. Support specialists embedded with local humanitarian operations established a credible cover. Combat operators disguised as security consultants established the extraction framework. Intelligence analysts and logistics personnel created multiple redundant extraction pathways. When unexpected resistance emerged, the team's diverse capabilities allowed them to pivot seamlessly between approaches, adapting in real time to changing conditions on the ground. The asset was extracted without casualties, along with critical intelligence that conventional methods would have abandoned. Upon their return, Task Force Echo found senior military leadership waiting for their debrief. General Robert Patterson, the Joint Special Operations Commander, attended personally, an unprecedented level of attention for a new task force's first mission. "Technical Sergeant Koslov," he said after their presentation concluded, "your team has accomplished in one operation what 3 previous task forces failed to achieve in multiple attempts. It appears your integrated model has proven its value beyond any reasonable doubt." Elena nodded, accepting the praise professionally, but directing attention to her team. "Sir, the credit belongs to these specialists who are willing to transcend traditional role limitations. They're the proof that our old models were unnecessarily restrictive." Patterson exchanged glances with Colonel Vance. "Well, we're convinced. Task Force Echo is being elevated to permanent operational status with expanded resources and personnel. And you, Technical Sergeant Koslov, are being promoted to Master Sergeant, effective immediately." Over the next year, Task Force Echo completed 17 high-priority missions across 3 continents. Their success rate was unprecedented, their adaptability becoming legendary within special operations circles. Elena's integrated model was being studied and implemented by other units, fundamentally changing how the resistance approached complex operational challenges. On a rare break between deployments, Elena found herself back at Black Spire for a leadership conference. After her presentation on integrated tactical operations, she encountered a familiar face in the corridor. Master Sergeant Rivera, her former ally from Nighthaven. "Chief," she greeted him warmly, "what brings you to Black Spire?" "Your reputation," he replied with a grin. "Half the resistance is talking about the miracle worker who transformed special operations methodology. Thought I should see for myself if the stories were true." "Exaggerated, I'm sure." "Not according to General Patterson. He says your task force has the highest success rate in SRF history." Rivera studied her for a moment. "You look different, Elena. Not just the new rank." "Different how?" "Comfortable. Like you finally found where you belong." Elena considered this. "Maybe it's because I'm not fighting to prove myself anymore. I'm just doing the work I was meant to do." "That tends to happen when you're exactly where you should be." As they caught up, Rivera shared news from Nighthaven. The cultural shift that had begun with Elena's departure had continued to evolve. More support personnel were pursuing combat qualifications. More combat leaders were recognizing the value of engineering expertise. The artificial divisions that had once seemed so insurmountable were gradually dissolving. "You started something bigger than yourself," Rivera observed.
People who never met you are following the path you cleared. That evening, Elena received an unexpected email from Commander Hargrove. She almost deleted it unread, but curiosity prevailed. The message was brief but direct. Koslov, I owe you an apology. My assessment of your capabilities was profoundly wrong. The model you've developed is revolutionizing our operational approach. I was on the wrong side of history, and I'm trying to learn from that mistake. Congratulations on your success. It was earned through merit I failed to recognize. Hargrove. Elena sat with the message for a long time, considering its implications. The vindication wasn't necessary, her success had already proven him wrong. But there was something powerful about the explicit acknowledgement, not because she needed his approval, but because it represented the institutional change she'd helped catalyze. The support specialist who'd been called too weak for combat hadn't just proven her critics wrong, she'd transformed the very system that once tried to limit her potential. Not by demanding recognition, but by demonstrating excellence that couldn't be denied. Not by fitting into existing structures, but by creating better ones. In military bases around the world, her story was inspiring others to reach beyond artificial limitations, proving that true strength comes in many forms, and that sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't a gun or a tank, it's the courage to stand your ground when everyone tells you to retreat. And somewhere in that contested valley where she dropped her rifle and raised her crossbow, a legend was born. The enemy forces who survived that day spread whispers of a resistance fighter who turned the tide of battle with a weapon that seemed to defy the laws of physics. A woman warrior who, when disarmed, revealed her true strength rather than her weakness. A reminder that sometimes what appears to be vulnerability is simply power not yet unleashed. Elena Koslov had been invisible for 3 years. Now, her impact would be felt for generations to come.